My name is Siti Nadira binti Bakar. My metric number is 292091. Keynes' ideas were reinforced by the Great Depression of the 1930s. Keynes also adopted the macroeconomic approach to view the economy as a whole. The growth of industry required large-scale economic control and measurement. The aggregate economic approach became more practical and necessary to address unemployment. There was growing concern about secular stagnation, which is slowing economic growth. After the World War I, population growth declined, no more geographic expansion, production exceeded consumption, fewer new technological inventions to drive major investment, and less prices competition slowed the replacement of the old machinery. Many economists in the US supported policies such as public work programs, deficit budget, easing of credits, and away of the multiplier effects. There was a theory said that as the national income increased, consumption expenditure rise less rapidly than total income, and saving increased more rapidly. For wages were seen not just as a cost but also as a source of demand. Wage cuts were rejected as it is ineffective for solving unemployment. This idea existed before Keynes, but Keynes unified them into one analytical framework, which is Keynesian revolution. There are 5 major tenets in the Keynesian school. The first one is macroeconomic emphasis. Second is demand orientation. Third, instability in the economics. Fourth, wage and prices rigidity. And last but not least, active fiscal and monetary policy. The first one is macroeconomic emphasis. Macroeconomic emphasis means looking at the big picture of the economy, not just one business or one person, but the whole economy. Keynes and his followers, which is Keynesian economists, were interested in understanding things like, first one, how much everyone is spending, which is consumption. Second, how much everyone is saving. Third one, the total income of the country. Next, the total amount of goods and services produced, which is output. And last but not least, the total number of people with jobs, which is employment. So, instead of looking at one company and how it decides how many workers to hire, they focus on how all the companies and people together are affected by total spending in the economy. For example, if people stop spending money, then businesses will sell less, which leads to lower outputs and more unemployment across the whole economy. This is the kind of relationship Keynesian study. Second measure is demand orientation. What is demand orientation in Keynesian economics? Keynesian economists believe that the total demand in the economics, which is called effective demand or aggregate expenditure, is the key factors that determines how much income people earn, how much produce, which is output produced, how much people have jobs, employment. But what happens if demand is too low? Let's say firm produce a lot of goods, but people are not have enough money to buy them all. So end up it will have a goods pile up, which is unsold inventory, and the firm will lose the money. So they lay off workers and produce less. This is lead to unemployment and lower outputs. So in the Keynesian view, if spending, which is the demand, is too low, the economy won't reach its full potential, even if we have the workers and machines to produce more. The third one is instability in the economics. The economy goes through ups and downs. Keynesian says the economy is naturally experience growth and recession. Why? Because investment spending, which is money businesses spend on things like buildings, equipment, and etc., is not stable. It is always goes ups and down a lot. So, small changes in investment will give big effects on the economics. For example, if businesses suddenly invest more, their total income and output increase by a larger amount. But if they cut back on investment, their income and output drop even more sharply. This is due to the multiplier effect, which is one person's spending becomes another person's income. How does the economy balance investment and savings? Some economists say this happens through interest rate changes, but Keynesian argue it happens more through changes in national income, which is how much the whole country earns, not just interest rate. In simple terms, if people are not saving enough to match investment, the total income in the economy will adjust, which is rise or fall, until they do. So, what determines how much business invests? There are two main things. The first one is interest rate, which is the cost of borrowing money, which is determined by how much people want to hold onto cash called liquidity preference and how much money is available in the economy, which is money supply. Second one is marginal efficiency of capital, which is expected profit from investment compared to its cost, which is determined by what businesses expect to earn in the future and how much capital goods like machines or buildings cost. Next is wage and price rigidity. Wages don't easily go down because wages are inflexible downward, meaning companies can't or won't easily cut salaries even when the economy gets worse. Why? Because union contracts agreement protects workers' pay. Second one, minimum wage laws. The laws prevent wages from falling below a certain point. And last, implicit contracts. Even informal understanding, employers don't want to upset workers by cutting wages during what they hope are temporary downturn. What happens when demands drop? When people buy less, which is like demand, companies see fewer sales. But instead of cutting wages to lower their costs, companies usually produce less and lay off workers. Why? Because cutting everyone's wages is hard, but laying off some workers is easier and can avoid mass dissatisfaction. Next, price. Price also don't easily go down. Just like wages, prices of goods and services also tend to be sticky downward. So, when demand falls, businesses don't quickly lower their prices. Instead, they cut back production. Only if the situation gets extremely bad, like a deep depression, and we will see deflation, which is price actually falling. The last measure is active fiscal and monetary policy. Keynesian believe the government should not just sit back during economic problems. They should actively using fiscal and monetary policies. So, what is the fiscal policy? As we all know, fiscal policy is what the government does with the spending and taxes. In a recession, which is the bad economy, the government should spend more like buildings, road, hospital, and etc. Or just cut taxes so people have more money to spend. Which is more spending will lead to more demand, businesses hire more, and the economic will recover. What is the monetary policy? Monetary policy is what the central banks, such as Bank Negara Malaysia, does with the money supply and interest rate. In a recession, they will increase the money supply and lower the interest rates and make the borrowing will cheaper. Lower interest rates encourage businesses to invest and consumer to spend. So, more investment and spending, economy will grow again. What about inflation? If the economy is overheating, which is the prices rising too fast, government should spend less or raise taxes so people have less money to spend, or reduce the money supply. So, by raise the interest rate, make the borrowing more expensive, and the businesses invest less. All these action help cool down the economy and bring prices under control.
My name is Nicole Anapumpan Peter. My metric number is 299985, and I'll be explaining on whom did the Keynesian school benefit or seek to benefit. Firstly, worker. Rising aggregate demand made for tight labor markets and permitted unions to negotiate on improving wages and working conditions with less fear of unemployment. Secondly, business interests. Business interests benefited from government contracts and government stimuli to get the economy out of depression or recession. Keynesian ideas advocated for government spending and other measures to boost the economy. This government action could directly benefit business through government contracts and indirectly by increasing consumer demand, leading to more sales and profits for business. Thirdly, farmers. Farmers wanted low interest rate and government support. They even had an early idea about the multiplier effect, arguing that every dollar given to farmers would boost the economy by $7 as farmers spend the money. Fourthly, reformers and intellectuals. Reformers and intellectuals enjoy vastly increased employment in government service, and they could pursue with crusading zeal the mild, safe, and sane reforms that grew out of Keynesian thinking. They saw Keynesian economics to create more jobs and implement fairer policies, giving them a framework to push for these changes with more confidence and intellectual backing. Fifthly, consumer. Most people like lower taxes and supported politicians who make that happen. Even though the government did not cut the spending at the same time, they justify the tax cut by saying it will get people to buy more and help the economy grow, which is a concept of Keynesian. economics. Now we will look into whether Keynesian school is valid, useful or correct during its time. Keynes make economics about solving real-world problems through government actions, not just by observing. For example, King shifted the focus to actively use government policies like spending and taxes to overcome problems like unemployment and recession. Moreover, after world wars and during the Great Depression, the old hands-off approach wasn't working and people demanded solutions. Keynes provided explanation and ways to fix things. Keynes' ideas make economics and their analysis much more important in shaping government policies. Keynes disagreed with the idea of cutting wages was the best way to solve unemployment. Keynes argued that if everyone's wage went down, people would have less money to spend, leading to even lower demand on goods and services, and making the unemployment problem even more worse. Now we will look into the negative consequences of wage cuts. Firstly, lower wages means less demand. Secondly, lower wages hurt those who spend more of their money and help those who save more, leading to less overall spending. Thirdly, wage cuts would likely cause labor disputes. Fourthly, people might expect wages to keep falling, leading business to hold off on investing. And finally, falling prices due to wage cuts make debt harder to pay back and reduce profits and also discourage on investments. Keynes created new ways to understand the economy. Firstly, new tools for analyzing the economy. Secondly, faster development of econometrics using statistics for economics. Thirdly, a new kind of liberalism that gave hope for helping those who left behind by unregulated capitalism. Keynes' work suggested that government intervention could improve things and help those who were struggling. This led to a new kind of liberalism that was more open to government playing a role in ensuring a fairer and more stable economy. Fourthly, better ways to track the nation's income. Keynes' idea highlighted the importance of measuring the total income and output of a country. And finally, lots of research on how the real world works economically.
Assalamualaikum. So, my part is the lasting contribution of the Keynes school. So, the first is Keynes challenging that markets always correct to themselves. He is argue that the government must be intensive, and especially during the economic downturn, because we have to stabilize the economic. So, the second one is he introduced the idea that's running a budget and a deficit not harmful during a crisis. By borrowing a spending more, government and can stimulate demand and reduce unemployment. So the third is keen shift the focus from supply to aggregate demand, the total demand for goods and service. Weak demand and leads to slow growth and unemployment. So boosting the demand is a. So the fourth one is the Keynes emphasize the use of government spending and taxation to manage economy cycle. So because of this, it will increasing spending during the recession and reducing during bombs and help it smooth out of fluctuation. The fifth is Keynes argue that without intervention, high unemployment can precise. Wage and price don't always adjust quickly enough. So by requiring policy action, we can restore to full employment. We go to the next slide, which is the Keynes school. I go for the example, which is financial interest rate. So government intervention in interest rate. The graph illustration how shifts in demand. So with the capital influence interest rate. A Keynes tenet is the government can adjust the fiscal policy by spending taxation to shift demand curve, requiring stable investment and growth. So with the liquidity preference theories, the demand sloping demand curve reject Keynes' idea that interest rates are determined by the supply and demand for money. Lower interest rate encourage borrowing and investment, aligning with Keynes' advocacy for monetary policy to combat economic downturns. So we go to the John Maynard Keynes biographical details. So full name is John Maynard Keynes, born in June 5, 1883, Cambridge, England. This in 21 April 1946. Education background is University of Cambridge. Key role is British economics, government advisor and author. So the legacy of this economics is a founder of Keynes economics revolution of the microeconomics thinking. The last slide I will simplify the story of the John Maynard Keynes. So John Maynard Keynes is a high influence economist. Before him, anyone thought that economy will serve correct, but with the Great Depression arrived, millions of people lost their job, and the economy came to the standstill. So Keynes introduced the new solution: when the economy is troubled, the government should spend money to help people and create a job for them. So he has idea refer to as Keynesian economics, transform the way countries operate their economics. Government still apply it today. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic struck, government spend money to help workers and business, just what Keynes would have advised. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nofatin Adila binti Aziz. My metric number is 299659. Now, I will present to you the Keynesian system, the system of ideas that Keynes developed in the general theory elements interrelated in consumption function, investment, and liquidity preference. So, the first element is consumption function. Keynes introduced the idea of fundamental psychological law, which says that as people's income increases, their consumption also increases, but not by the full amount of that increase. In other words, people tend to save part of their income. This idea forms the basis of consumption function, which shows how total consumption in the economy is related to the total national income. So the consumption function is expressed as C equal to Fy, where C is total consumption and Y is national income. So the slope of this function is called marginal propensity to consume, or MPC. MPC equal to change in C over change in Y. It shows how much consumption change when income change. This leads us to the saving function, where saving is also a function of income, S equal to Fy. The equivalent of MPC for saving is called the marginal propensity to save, or MPS equal to change in S over change in Y. When Y increase, people spend and save more, but extra spending MPC is always less than the extra income. So importantly, MPC plus MPS equal to 1. It is because any change in incomes is either consumed or saved. So Keynes defined investment as spending on capital goods such as machines, tools, or buildings that help produce other goods and services. He did not include the financial investment like buying stocks or bonds, because those don't directly recreate new productive capacity. So the business invests based on the expectation of future profits. The more profitable the investment seems, the more likely it is that business will spend money on it. Firms make profit using the capital. So before they investing, the firm need to know how productive the capital is, the price they can sell the new output, and the cost, wages and materials needed to use the capital, and supply price is the cost of producing or buying the capital, and expected return is the money the businesses expect to earn each year from investment, and marginal efficiency of capital is expected rate of return on capital investment. So the discount rate equal to value of all future returns equal to capital's cost. So When will a business invest? The firms will invest when marginal efficiency of capital is greater than interest rate. Then they will stop invest when R equal to 0. Interest rate higher, so will fewer investment and vice versa. So there's an inverse relationship between interest rate and investment. If interest rate fall, investment rises and vice versa. So why are change over time? It is because many firms invest in the same type of capital, expected profit fall, so expected return decrease. And more demand for the capital can raise its price. So supply price will increase. So both of these cause R, which is marginal efficiency of capital, to drop. So now we move to the topic Keynesian versus classical. So classical said that interest rate balance the savings and investment. Meanwhile, Keynes argued that income is a stronger driver of saving and that the interest rate is actually a reward for giving up the liquidity, not for saving. And in his view, people sometimes prefer to hold onto cash or for safety, even if interest rates are low. So this is called liquidity preference. The actual interest rate is the result of the demand for cash versus the supply of money.
My name is Nur Ainul Amira and my metric number is 299027. So today we will talk about liquidity preferences. What is liquidity preferences? It is a reason why people prefer to hold cash instead of investing it or spending it. So there are three main reasons why people hold cash. Firstly is transaction motive. Transaction motive is people prefer to hold cash for everyday use, like we want to pay our bills, want to pay our food, and etc. Secondly is precautionary motive. Precautionary motive is the desire to keep some cash for emergency use, like suddenly our car breakdowns, we need to buy some medicines, and etc. Thirdly is speculative motive. Speculative motive is people will hold cash when interest rates are low. This is because the lower the interest rate, it will give us the lower return. So now we will move on to the money supply and money demand curve. Like we can see, money demand curve is downward sloping and money supply curve is vertical. The reason why the money demand curve is downward sloping is because when interest rate low, people will choose to hold cash instead of buy bond. Because when they buy bond, it will give them a lower return. That's why people will wait until the interest rate rise again. Then they will buy bond because holding cash at that time will become more costly. That's why when interest rate rises, people will choose to hold bond instead of hold cash. So when interest rate rise, people will hold bond. When interest rate are lower, they will hold cash. Secondly, the vertical money supply curve. The vertical money supply curve indicates that only central bank policy will shift the money supply curve. It will not affected by interest rate.
Now we are going to the part equilibrium income and employment. Keynes assume that there is a high correlation between the national income and the level of unemployment. This is of course not necessarily true. Large investment in labor saving capital, for example, can cause the real domestic output and national income to rise more rapidly than employment. Keynes, however, was concerned mainly with the short run. He defends this and proceeds with the quip, "In the long run, we all are dead." In this short run, we can neglect the technology change. We can then agree that the level of income determines the level of employment, and the two variables can be used interchangeably. If we ignore the government and the international trade, the immediate determinants of income and employment are consumption and investment spending. These two spending components constitute the aggregate expenditure in the economy. Equilibrium national income occurs where the combined level of consumption and the investment equal to the current level of income. Symbolically, that is where y equals to C plus I. Because saving is the difference between the income and the consumption, then will become the saving equals to the income minus the consumption. Solving the two equations provide an alternative condition for equilibrium income where the saving is equal to investment. The aggregate expenditure curve AE shows the combined level of consumption and investment spending programming at each level of income. The vertical distance between the AE and the consumption function is the level of investment, and the vertical distance between the consumption function and the horizontal axis is the level of consumption. Equilibrium income is at y1 because at this point the aggregate expenditure curve crosses the 45-degree line, indicating that the C plus I is equal to the existing level of income y1. Only at y1 is the vertical distance saving equal to the level of planned investment. How might the depression occur? Asks Keynes. His answer is easily demonstrated through the simple model just developed. Suppose that the income level y1 is the full employment level of income. Further assume that for some reason entrepreneurs become pessimistic about the future business prospect and that this results in a downward revision of expected return on the new investment. This translates that to a decline in the marginal efficiency of capital and a leftward shift of the investment demand curve. A decline in investment spending reduces the aggregate expenditure from AE1 to AE2. In response to declining sales and rising the inventory, firms will reduce their employment and production. National income therefore declined from y1 to y2. We note that the equilibrium income declined by more than drop in investment itself. The reason is multiplier effect of an initial change in investment. Keynes borrowed this theory from R.F. Khan and incorporated it directly into his own model. The multiplier measures the ultimate effect on income of a change in spending. It is the change in income divided by the change in investment. The size of the multiplier depends on the slope of the aggregate expenditure curve.
So now we will talk about policy to promote full employment and stability. According to Keynes, a key way to tackle high unemployment is by managing their aggregate expenditure. So based on the graph, we can see that initially recessionary gap occurs. So to eliminate this, we can use expansionary fiscal policy. So government will increase their spending and reduce the tax. So when government increase their spending, this will increase demand. So businesses have to increase their production. To increase their production, they need to hire more workers. So this will recover the economy lah. So economy will become normal again. Then expansionary monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy is when central bank increase the money supply to reduce the tax. So when tax being reduced, people will invest more, they will spend more. So economy will recover. But this method will not work when liquidity trap occurs. So we will talk about liquidity trap more in the next slide. Now we will look at the investment market. This market stands in between two markets, which is liquidity trap and interest insensitive investment. So we will look at these two curves in the next slide. Now we will talk about liquidity trap. So during normal economy, when economy slow down, central bank will increase the money supply. So when money supply increase, money supply curve will shift to the right, interest rate will reduce, so people will spend more, will invest more, so economy will recover again. But during recession, when economy slow down, interest rate are already low, but central bank will still choose to increase the money supply to boost the economy back. But during recession, people will not use their money. They don't want to invest their money. They don't want to spend their money because they are afraid that economy will not recover again. So they will choose to trap their money instead of using it. So this is what we call liquidity trap. When people have money but they don't want to use it, they don't want to spend it, they don't want to invest it. So there are no change in investment, no change in spending. So economy will stay inactive. So liquidity trap is when people choose to trap their money instead of investing and spend it. Now we will move on to interest insensitive investment. Like we can see in this graph, investment curve are vertical. So Keynes are always disagree with classical belief when they say that investment will increase when interest rate fall. But in reality, during bad time, even though the interest rate are low, but investment will stay at the same level. This is because people are afraid of many risks, like they're afraid that business won't be profitable, the economy will not recover again, so the investment become interest insensitive when interest rates are low, but the investment will stay at the same level. So this will make the investment curve become vertical. So in this time, the monetary policy will become not effective.